My name is Claire. I'm 36, and I've spent the last 11 years as a corporate event director, which is a fancy way of saying I book, negotiate, and pay for other people's celebrations for a living. Weddings for 400, galas for 1,000. I know what a private dining room costs before the menus hit the table. I know the markup on a bottle of wine down to the dollar. So when my family called after 2 years of silence and invited me to a welcome home dinner at the Ashwood Grill, I should have asked one question before I said yes. Who booked the room? I didn't ask. I drove 35 minutes across town, walked past the valet stand, and found 18 members of my family already seated at a long table buried under seafood towers, dry-aged ribeyes, and 2 bottles of champagne that cost more than my car payment. My brother Daniel looked up from the head of the table, raised his glass, and said the words I'd been dreading my whole life without knowing it. "There she is."
The one who can afford it.
He thought he had me boxed in. 18 witnesses, a $4,000 bill, a daughter trained since childhood to keep the peace by opening her wallet. What he didn't count on was the folder in my bag, or the one quiet sentence I was about to say to the manager, a woman I happened to know by name, or what the reservation records were about to reveal to the entire table 20 minutes later. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people face impossible family moments and walk out with their dignity intact. If you've ever been the one who's expected to pay, to smooth things over, to swallow the insult and sign the check, this story is for you. Drop a comment and hit subscribe, because you're going to want to see how this one ends. But let me back up. 2 weeks before that dinner, before the parking lot full of cars I recognized, before my brother tried to hand me a bill the size of a mortgage payment in front of 18 people, I need to tell you who they thought I was, because that's the version they were counting on. And it's the version I'd already stopped being. I'm not rich. Let me kill that story right now, because it's the story my family tells about me, and it's the story Daniel used to set the whole trap. I drive a 7-year-old Subaru with a coffee stain on the passenger seat I've stopped apologizing for. I rent a 1-bedroom apartment with good light and a landlord who fixes things. Eventually. My one indulgence is good coffee beans I grind myself, and I bring my lunch to work 4 days out of 5. Here's the thing about my job. It looks like money from the outside. I spend other people's budgets. Big budgets. I sign off on floral orders that cost 10 grand and stand in ballrooms that rent for the price of a house. So my family decided, somewhere along the way, that all of it was mine, that I lived the way the events looked. Nobody ever asked. They just decided. That's a pattern with my family. They decide who you are, and then they hand you the bill for being that person. 2 weeks before the dinner, I was at my desk finalizing a vendor contract for a nonprofit gala when my phone lit up. I looked down and felt something cold slide behind my ribs. 2 years of silence, and there it was. A message from my mother. Not a call, a text. Careful, warm, and just a little too polished, like she'd typed it 3 times before sending. She said the family had been doing a lot of thinking, that everyone missed me, that they wanted to welcome me back with a nice dinner at the Ashwood Grill. Nothing fancy, just us, a fresh start. Nothing fancy, just us. Then, 30 seconds later, a second text with the line that should have set off every alarm I owned. We're family, Claire. When you have, you share. That's how we were raised. When you have, you share. My mother has been saying that sentence to me since I was 19 years old. She said it when she needed my first real paycheck to cover the water heater. She said it when Daniel's car got repossessed and he needed a loan that was never a loan. She said it the year I quietly covered 2 months of their rent and told them the landlord had made a mistake in their favor, because I knew Dad would rather lose the house than admit he needed help from his daughter. When you have, you share had always meant exactly one thing in my family. Claire has, Claire shares, Claire pays. I read the message twice, and I noticed what wasn't in it. No apology. No, we were wrong. No, we're sorry for what we said. Just, it's time. Come back. And by the way, bring the version of you that pays. I typed back 3 words. I'll be there. Then I set my phone face down on my desk and stared at the vendor contract until the numbers stopped making sense. 2 years ago, my brother Daniel decided he was going to become a real estate investor. Not a job, not a plan, a title. He'd watched a few videos, read half of one book, and started calling himself a property developer at family dinners. And then he found a duplex 2 towns over that needed $40,000 in repairs before anyone could live in it, and he needed someone to make that $40,000 appear. That someone was supposed to be me. Mom called on a Sunday afternoon. Dad was on the line too, silent, the way he gets silent right before he decides you've disappointed him. Daniel needed the money. It was a sure thing. I had a good job. I understood investments. And besides, when you have, you share. I asked to see the numbers first. There were no numbers. There was a Zillow screenshot and a contractor Daniel had met at a bar. I asked about the after-repair value, the comparable sales on that street, whether he'd had an inspection. Daniel looked at me like I'd spit in his drink. Mom's voice went flat and cold in a way I still hear sometimes. He's your brother, Claire. You don't need a spreadsheet to believe in your own family. I said no. Not because I didn't love Daniel. I did. But I've spent 11 years watching people light money on fire chasing something they saw on a screen. And I knew exactly what $40,000 of someone else's dream looks like when the contractor stops answering, and the duplex sits empty, and the bill still comes due every single month. Dad finally spoke. One sentence. He said, "If you can't help your own family, then I don't know what we raised." I drove home. By Monday morning, I'd been quietly dropped from the group chat, the birthday texts, the Sunday calls. Nobody announced it. There was no fight, no fireworks. They just closed the door and let the silence do the talking. For 2 years, I was the daughter who loved her money more than her own blood. Daniel bought the duplex anyway. Co-signed by an uncle, I heard later. It's still empty. But somehow that never became the family story. The family story stayed the same. Claire wouldn't help. Here's the part that's hard to say out loud. The silence almost broke me. And not because I thought they were right. I knew they weren't. It broke me because for the first time in my adult life, nobody needed me. And I didn't know who I was if nobody needed me. That's the real wound. It took me 18 months and a therapist named Rachel to say it plainly. I had been the family fixer since I was 17 years old. First paycheck went to the water heater. My tax refund went to Mom's dental work the year she cracked a molar and swore she'd just live with it. When Daniel totaled his first car, I covered the difference the insurance didn't and told him the dealership had cut me a deal because I knew he'd never take it as charity. When my cousin got married, I paid for the venue deposit and stood in the back and smiled while Mom gave a toast about raising kids who show up for each other. Kids who show up. One checkbook. I didn't do it because I'm generous. I did it because somewhere around 15, I figured out the fastest way to keep my house calm was to make sure nobody ever had to ask twice. Ask once, Claire handles it. everyone smiles, dinner stays quiet. I trained them. That's the truth I had to sit with. I taught my own family that my wallet was a machine. Feed it a little guilt, and out comes a check. And when the machine finally said no 2 years ago, they didn't ask what was wrong with it. They unplugged it and walked away. So when Mom's text landed after 2 years, when you have, you share, I felt the old reflex fire in my chest like a muscle I hadn't used in a long time. Go fix it. Pay whatever it takes. Make it quiet again. But underneath that, quieter, I heard Rachel. Steady, patient. The same thing she'd told me a dozen times. You taught them you'd always pay, Claire. That's the thing you get to fix. Not by paying more, by finally stopping. My friend Priya told me not to go. We were splitting a sandwich at the deli near my office the day after the invitation came, and I read her the texts out loud. She put down her half of the sandwich before I even finished. Claire, that's not a dinner. That's an ambush with a menu. I laughed, but she wasn't laughing. Priya had never met my family, and she could see it clearer than I could after 36 years living inside it. 2 years of nothing, she said. And the first thing they do is book a restaurant? Not a coffee, not a walk. A restaurant. Ask yourself who's holding the check when that night ends. I already knew the answer. I just didn't want to say it out loud in a deli. But I'd already decided to go. Not because I believed them. Not because I expected an apology. I'd stopped expecting that somewhere in month 6 of the silence. I wanted to sit across from my parents one time and find out whether 2 years had changed anything, or whether the quiet had just been a longer version of the same conversation we'd always had. The one where I listen, I agree, and I pay. I wanted closure, even if closure just meant watching the door swing shut for good. And there was one more thing. I'll be honest, because I think some of you already know exactly what I'm about to say. I missed my mother. Not the woman who kept score. Not the one who could turn when you have, you share, into a weapon so smooth you didn't feel the cut until you were already bleeding. I missed the mother who used to let me sit on the kitchen counter when I was 8 and steal raw cookie dough off the spoon while she pretended not to notice. That mother hadn't called in 2 years either. But some nights I still tasted the cookie dough. So I told Priya I was going. I told her I'd be fine. I told myself the same thing, and I almost believed it. I made one rule. I wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it to the dashboard of my Subaru the morning of. 1 dinner. Be kind. Pay for nothing. If it turns, you leave before dessert. That sticky note was still stuck to the dash when I pulled into the Ashwood Grill's parking lot that evening and started counting cars I recognized. I counted 11. Mom had written, "Just us." I dressed simple on purpose. Dark jeans, a cream blouse I wear to client meetings, low boots, no jewelry except the thin gold ring my grandmother left me. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I didn't. My family already believed I flaunted my money. The truth was, I'd worn that same blouse to 3 vendor meetings that month and steamed it myself over the bathtub that morning. I wasn't going to walk into the Ashwood Grill dressed like the version of me they'd invented. I was going to walk in as the version I actually was. The drive took 35 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. Somewhere near the highway exit, my stomach started doing the thing it does when I walk into a ballroom the day of a wedding and the caterer's van hasn't shown up yet. That tight, low, humming dread. Instinct. My body knew something my brain was still arguing about. I almost took the exit for home. My blinker was on. I sat at the ramp for one full light cycle with the turn signal ticking. Then I thought about the cookie dough. And I thought about Rachel. And I turned the other way. The Ashwood Grill sits on the nice end of town, the end with valet parking and a fountain out front, and hostesses who wear all black and speak in that low, smooth restaurant voice. I bypassed the valet, parked my Subaru myself in the back row, coffee stain and all, because I wasn't about to pay $6 to have someone judge my car. Dad's sedan was in the second row, Mom's little hatchback beside it. Fine. Then I saw Aunt Carol's minivan, Uncle Rob's truck,
Daniel's leased BMW with the dealer frame still on the plate, my cousin Megan's car. 3 more I recognized. 2 I didn't. 11 vehicles. Just us, Mom had written. I sat there with the engine off, hands on the wheel, reading that sticky note. 1 dinner. Pay for nothing. Leave before dessert. The smart move, the Priya move, was to reverse out of that lot, drive 35 minutes home, and eat the leftover pasta in my fridge and never think about the Ashwood Grill again. But I got out of the car. I straightened my blouse. I locked the door. Because I was 36 years old, and I'd spent 2 years learning how to stop running. And I was not going to start again in a restaurant parking lot on a Thursday night. The front doors were heavy glass with brass handles, the kind that whisper the entrees start at $38 before you even see a menu. Inside, the lobby smelled like rosemary and browned butter and money. A hostess in a black dress looked up and smiled.
Reservation?
"I'm with the Whitaker party," I said. Something flickered across her face. The smallest thing. Gone in a second. But I know that flicker. I've worn that flicker. It's the look a host gives when a large party has been camped in a room for an hour, ordering hard, and someone new walks in and you're privately hoping, please let this be the person who's actually organized. "Right this way," she said. "They're already seated." She grabbed 1 menu, just 1, and led me toward the back. I heard them before I saw them. Laughter. Glasses. My Aunt Carol's laugh cutting over the top of every other table in the room, the way it always has. 1 dinner. Leave before dessert. I turned the corner into the private room, and there was the table. 18 chairs. Every single one filled except the one at the far end, directly across from my brother. The table ran the whole length of the room under white linen and low candles, and I could read the platters from 10 feet away, because reading platters is literally my job. A 2-tier seafood tower, oysters melting on the ice they'd clearly been sitting on for a while. 2 dry-aged ribeyes carved down to the bone. A cheese board the size of a serving tray. And in the center, 2 bottles of champagne I recognized instantly from a client tasting last spring. Around $140 a bottle, retail. 1 empty, 1 nearly gone. They'd been here a while, and they'd been ordering like someone else was buying. The hostess paused at the edge of the room and gave me a look I've traded with 100 servers across 100 dining rooms. It translated perfectly. Good luck. Then she leaned in half an inch and said quietly, "Just so you know, the reservation's under Daniel Whitaker. He put a card down to hold it. We require one for parties this size." I filed that sentence the way I file every operational detail in my life. Silently. Completely. Permanently. Daniel's name on the reservation. Daniel's card holding the table. And yet, somehow,
Before I'd even sat down, I already knew the check wasn't meant to land on him. My mother saw me first. She stood up with both arms open, and every head at the table turned at once. "Claire! Oh, honey! Look at you! Look at you!" And then it happened. Applause. Actual applause. 18 people clapping like I was a soldier coming home instead of the daughter they'd let disappear for 2 years without a single phone call. Uncle Rob let out a little whoop. Aunt Carol pressed a napkin to the corner of her eye. Daniel, at the head of the table, raised his champagne glass and gave me a smile with plenty of teeth and no warmth behind it at all. 18 people. Oysters and dry-aged ribeye and 2 bottles of champagne. Just us, Mom had written. I sat down. What else do you do when 18 people are watching and the chair is already pulled out and a server is filling your water glass before your bag hits the floor? You sit and you smile. Because that's what 11 years of running rooms full of demanding people teaches you. How to smile while your brain runs a full threat assessment underneath it. Mom settled back into her seat, glowing. We wanted it to be a surprise, the whole family all together again, just like it used to be. I thought it was just us, I said gently. She waved her hand like she was shooing away a fly. Well, once Carol heard, and then Rob, and then your cousins wanted to come, it just grew. You know how family is. I knew exactly how family was. I scanned the table the way I scan a floor plan. Dad at the head, quiet, carving a piece of ribeye like it was a Sunday roast, not meeting my eyes. Daniel to his right, phone in one hand, champagne in the other. Aunt Carol and Uncle Rob anchoring the middle. Cousins I hadn't spoken to since a Christmas years ago. Megan and her husband. 2 people I genuinely did not recognize. And, I'd learn later, Aunt Carol's new neighbors, who were apparently eating $140 champagne on the strength of a family reunion they had no part in. Mom leaned over and squeezed my hand. See? When you have, you share. This is what it's all about. There it was, the same 5 words, same warm wrapping, same target. I squeezed her hand back and said nothing, because I was counting plates. My brother is the kind of man who orders for the table, not asks, orders. He raised 2 fingers and the server came over, a young guy, maybe 22, moving fast and careful the way people move when a table's too big and the order's too complicated, and they know one wrong plate means a conversation with the manager they can't afford. His name tag said Marcus. He had that look I knew from the inside, running on caffeine and adrenaline, counting the hours till the shift ended. Daniel rattled off additions without glancing at the menu. Another seafood tower. 2 more of the ribeye. The dry-aged, not the regular. And bring us another bottle of the champagne. The Veuve, the good one. The good one. Loud enough for the tables on either side to hear. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a credit card, and held it up between 2 fingers like a card in a magic trick, showing the audience before the reveal. Put it all on my tab, he told Marcus. We're celebrating tonight. Family's back together. Marcus scribbled, nodded, and disappeared toward the kitchen with the expression of a man who badly needed to stand in the walk-in cooler for 90 seconds. I watched Daniel slide the card back into his jacket and pat the pocket. The way you pat a dog that just did a trick, right? And something was wrong. I grew up watching Daniel count out gas money in quarters. I watched him argue with a waitress over a $2 upcharge on a side of avocado. This is a man who once drove 40 minutes to return a phone charger because he found the same one $3 cheaper.
Daniel Whitaker did not order the Veuve. He did not wave credit cards like flags at a parade. This was a performance, and it was aimed at me. Look how well we're doing, Claire. Look how little we ever needed you. Except his BMW in the lot had a dealer frame on the plate and paper tags in the back window. A lease, 3 payments deep. The kind of car you drive to look like the version of yourself you can't afford yet. Except my mother's coat, folded over the back of her chair, was the same wool coat she'd worn to my college graduation 14 years ago, the lining coming loose at the cuff. Except my father, who had said nothing to me, not one word, in 40 minutes, kept glancing at the champagne bottle every time someone refilled a glass, and I watched his jaw tighten just slightly each time, the math running behind his eyes. They were performing wealth for me. I just didn't know the price of admission yet. But I was starting to do the arithmetic. 2 seafood towers, 4 ribeyes, 3 bottles of Veuve now, plus the 2 mystery bottles that had already been half drained when I walked in. 18 entrees, appetizers I hadn't even seen come out. I'd booked enough of these rooms to run the tape in my head. Before tax and tip, this table was already sitting somewhere north of $3,000. And climbing. The small cuts started around the 3rd bottle. Aunt Carol leaned across Uncle Rob and said, "Must be nice, planning parties for rich people all day. Some of us still clip coupons, you know." She laughed when she said it, the way people laugh when they want you to know they mean it. Cousin Megan tilted her head at me with a sympathy she hadn't earned. "Do you ever feel guilty, Claire? Living the way you do while your parents were going through such a hard time?" I didn't know about a hard time. Nobody had told me about a hard time. In 2 years, not one of these people had picked up a phone to tell me anything. Daniel, without looking up from the ribeye, added, "She wouldn't know. She hasn't exactly been around." Each comment landed with the precision of something rehearsed. Not scripted exactly, but aligned. The way a choir finds the same note without anyone waving a baton. They'd been talking about me. For 2 years, probably. About my absence, my money, my imaginary life. And they'd all walked into that room tonight carrying the same story in their pockets. Claire left. Claire has plenty. Claire owes. Aunt Carol delivered the thesis statement. She reached across the table, took my hand the way you take someone's hand at a funeral, and said, warm as pie, "Family doesn't keep score, sweetheart." I almost laughed out loud. Family doesn't keep score. This from a woman who stopped speaking to her own son for 8 months over who got Grandma's china cabinet. I didn't laugh. I slid my hand back gently, picked up my glass, and drank. Sparkling water. The only thing in front of me. The only thing I'd ordered. The contrast was almost funny. 18 people swimming in oysters and Veuve, and me at the end of the table with a glass of San Pellegrino, sitting there like the designated driver at a bachelor party nobody had invited her to. Marcus passed behind my chair and I caught his eye. "Anything for you tonight?" he asked, quiet, half a step out of the family's earshot. "Just the water," I said. He glanced at the wreckage of the table. The empty shells, the drained bottles, the plates stacked 3 deep, waiting for a busser who was clearly buried somewhere else in the room. Then he looked back at me and nodded, slow, like he'd understood something I hadn't said out loud. "Let me tell you about Marcus. He was maybe 22, built thin the way restaurant kids get before they learn to eat standing up between rushes. He was handling all 18 of us mostly alone, one busser drifting past every few minutes, but Marcus running every order, every refill, Every, "Excuse me, can we get more bread from Aunt Carol?" who'd asked 3 times in 15 minutes. He never sighed. He never let it show. He refilled my water without being asked, and when he set the glass down, he caught me watching the table with an expression I probably should have hidden better. "Long night," he murmured, and I almost told him the truth. Instead, I just said, "You're doing great. Better than most of the pros I hire." He blinked, startled, like he'd forgotten a guest could say something like that to him. Then he stood up maybe half an inch straighter and moved on to refill Uncle Rob's glass. I watched him go, and I thought about the girl I used to be. 19 years old, 4 plates up one arm, crying in a stockroom on the bad nights, learning that the customers who snapped their fingers were always the ones who tipped the least. That girl had no idea she'd end up on this side of a table like this one, sitting across from the family that turned her into a fixer, being asked, without being asked, to write one more check. But that girl would understand exactly what I was about to do. She'd understand it perfectly. I excused myself to the restroom around the time the 4th bottle arrived. Nobody noticed. Daniel was mid-story about a development deal he was closing. The same duplex, I realized, dressed up in new words 2 years later, still empty, still framed as a triumph. I slid out of my chair, and not one head turned. That's the thing about being the family wallet. When you're not being asked for something, you're invisible. I walked toward the back, past the hostess stand, and that's when I saw her. Standing near the kitchen pass, tablet in hand, reviewing something with a line cook. Sharp blazer, hair pulled back, the calm authority of someone who runs a floor for a living. And I knew her face before I knew her name. And then the name came all at once. Diane Okafor. 6 years ago, Diane was the banquet manager at the downtown Hilton where I ran a corporate gala every winter for 4 years running. We'd stood in loading docks at midnight together solving disasters. She'd covered for me the year my linen vendor no-showed, and I'd talked her up to a hotel GM who ended up promoting her. When she left for a restaurant group, we lost touch the way work friends do. But you don't forget the people you survived the trenches with. She looked up, and I watched recognition hit her face too. "Claire? Claire Whitaker?" She crossed the floor, and I got a quick, real hug, the kind you don't fake. "What are you here tonight? For dinner?" "Family thing," I said, and something about the way I said it made her smile fade half a degree. "You're with the big party in the back," she said slowly. Not a question. "The Whitaker 18 top." "That's the one." Diane glanced over her shoulder toward the private room, then back at me, and her manager face slid into place. Professional, careful, but underneath it, the old loyalty of someone who'd watched my back at 1 a.m. once. She lowered her voice. "Can I ask you something? Off the record?" "Always." The gentleman who booked, Daniel, he put a card down to hold the table, standard for parties this size. But when he called to confirm this afternoon, he told my assistant the check should go to his sister when the meal's done. Said she'd insist on taking care of everyone. Diane watched my face. "That's you, isn't it?" There it was. Not a suspicion anymore. Not Priya's warning or my own tightening stomach. Confirmation. From the woman holding the reservation record, spoken out loud in the hallway of the Ashwood Grill. Daniel had booked the table under his own name, put down his own card as a placeholder, and then called ahead to arrange, in advance, before I'd even walked through the door, that the $4,000 bill would be handed to me. He'd told the staff I'd insist. He'd built the trap and then told the restaurant I'd walk into it smiling. I felt something go very still and very cold inside me. Not anger, exactly. Something clearer than anger. Certainty. "Diane," I said, Can you do me a favor? Here's the part I need to back up and explain. The folder. When Mom's text came 2 weeks earlier, when you have, you share, I didn't just decide to show up. I decided to show up prepared. 11 years of running events teaches you one thing above all else. The person holding the paperwork controls the room. So I did what I do for a living. I built a file. Not out of paranoia, out of habit, and then out of something harder to name. Because part of me, the part that had spent 18 months in Rachel's office, knew that if I walked into a family dinner with nothing but hope in my hands, I'd walk out having paid for it. Literally. I needed something to hold on to that wasn't guilt. Inside a slim folder in my bag, I had 3 things. The first was a single sheet of paper, printed bank records, my own, going back 11 years. Every transfer I'd ever made to my family. The water heater, Mom's dental work, Daniel's car loan.
The venue deposit for Megan's wedding. The 2 months of rent I'd disguised as a landlord's error. I'd never added it up before. When the total printed at the bottom of the page, I sat at my desk and stared at it for a long time. $41,200. Over 11 years, I had quietly moved $41,000 into my family, nearly the exact amount Daniel had asked me for and I'd refused, the refusal that got me exiled. I'd already given them a duplex. I just gave it to them 1 water heater at a time. The second thing in the folder was the text thread. Moms, when you have, you share. Daniel's messages from 2 years ago. The sure thing, the Zillow screenshot. Dad's, I don't know what we raised. Printed, dated, in order. And the third thing was a single index card, and on it, in my own handwriting, 1 sentence Rachel had made me write in her office 3 sessions ago and carry with me until I believed it. You are not responsible for managing other people's disappointment. I hadn't planned to use any of it exactly. I'd told myself it was just insurance, something to steady my hands. But standing in that hallway, listening to Diane confirm that my own brother had prearranged my humiliation with the restaurant staff before I'd parked my car, I understood the folder wasn't insurance anymore. It was evidence, and I finally knew how to use it. What do you need? Diane asked. I thought about it carefully, because whatever I did next, I was going to do in front of 18 people, and I was only going to get to do it once. When my brother asks for the check, I said, I want you to bring it to him, not me, to Daniel, under his name, the name on the reservation, the card he put down. Whatever he says, however he insists it goes to me, it goes to him. Diane's mouth twitched. He put the card down as a hold. If he wants to use it, that's between him and the card. Exactly. He booked it. His name? His card on file? I paused. And one more thing. When you bring it, bring the reservation confirmation with it. The one that shows who made the booking and put the card down. Just set it on the table, where people can see. Diane looked at me for a long moment, and then the old trench loyalty won, and something else too. I think she'd seen enough family dinners go sideways in that room to know exactly what was happening to me. You know, she said quietly, in 12 years of doing this, I've watched a lot of people get handed a check that was never theirs. Most of them just pay it. It's easier. She tilted her head. You're not going to just pay it, are you? No, I said. I'm not. She smiled. The real one. The loading dock at midnight one. Then give me a signal when you're ready. Touch your water glass. I'll bring it exactly the way you asked. I went back into the private room and sat down in my chair at the far end of the table. Nobody had noticed I was gone. Daniel was still talking. Mom was laughing. The 5th bottle was open now.
I folded my hands on the white linen, right next to my glass of water, and I waited. The plates came and went. The sixth bottle didn't get ordered, which told me even Daniel could feel the edges of the number now. And then the moment came, the way I knew it would. Daniel set down his fork, tapped his champagne glass with a knife, ting, 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 and stood up. The room quieted. 18 faces turned toward him, flushed and happy and full of someone else's food. "I just want to say something," he began, holding his glass up. 2 years ago, this family went through a rough patch. And tonight, we're all back together. That means everything to Mom and Dad. To all of us. He turned, and his eyes found me at the end of the table. That smile again. All teeth. And I think we all know who we have to thank for being able to celebrate like this tonight. A beat. My sister, Claire, who's always been so generous with this family. And there it was, the setup, delivered in a toast, in front of 18 witnesses, so that saying no would look like I was ruining a beautiful family reunion. Aunt Carol pressed her napkin to her eye again. Uncle Rob went, "Aw." Mom beamed at me, that warm, expectant, when you have you share glow radiating down the length of the table. Daniel raised his hand and, without breaking eye contact with me, called across the room, "Marcus, we're ready for the check whenever you are." Then, casually, like an afterthought, like a knife going in soft, "Bring it on down to my sister. She's got us tonight." The table burst into applause again. The same applause from the beginning of the night. 18 people clapping for my generosity before I'd agreed to a single thing, clapping me into the trap. And Mom reached over and squeezed my hand and whispered, "This is what family does, honey." And I looked at all of them, every clapping, smiling, well-fed face, and I felt the old reflex rise up one final time. Just pay it. Smile. Make it quiet. Be the girl they raised. And then I looked down at my folder, and I touched my water glass. Diane came through the door herself, not Marcus. Diane, in her sharp blazer, calm as a Sunday, carrying a small leather check presenter in one hand and a single printed page in the other. The applause was still trickling out as she crossed the room, and instead of coming to me, she walked to the head of the table and set the check down gently in front of Daniel. The clapping stopped like someone had cut a wire. Daniel looked at the presenter in front of him, then up at Diane, and gave a small, tight laugh. "No, sorry, there's a mix-up. This goes to her." He pointed at me. "My sister, down there." "I understand, sir," Diane said, warm and unbothered, her floor voice smooth as glass. "But the reservation was made under your name, and the card on file to hold the table is yours. Per our policy for parties this size, the check is presented to the cardholder of record." She set the second page down beside the check, the reservation confirmation. His name printed clean across the top, the card hold, the party of 18, the timestamp. Right there on the white linen where everyone could see it. "I've placed the booking confirmation with it for your reference," she added pleasantly. "Take all the time you need." Then she folded her hands and stepped back one polite pace, and waited. Daniel's face did something I will remember for the rest of my life. The color left it. His eyes dropped to the number in the presenter, and I watched his throat move. Because Daniel who counts gas money in quarters, Daniel who drives 40 minutes to save $3, was now looking at a bill somewhere north of $4,000 with his own name printed on the paper beside it, in front of the entire family he'd just performed his wealth for. This is a mistake," he said. His voice cracked on the second word. Claire, come on." Tell her. Every head at the table swung down toward me, and I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I've learned you never have to if the room is already yours. It's not a mistake, Daniel, I said. You booked the table. You put your card down. You ordered the second seafood tower and the ribeyes and the veuve, the good one, I think you called it, loud enough for the whole room to hear. I let that sit for a second. So it's your dinner, and it's your check. You have the money, he shot back, and the mask was fully off now, his voice climbing. You have plenty. This is what you do. You help family. I always paid, I said. Yes, let's talk about that. I opened the folder. I didn't wave it around. I just took out the first page and set it on the table. Calm. The same way Diane had set down the check. This is 11 years of bank records. Every dollar I've ever quietly moved to this family. The water heater. Mom's dental work. The Muller you were going to just live with, Mom. Daniel's car after the accident. The one I told you the dealership discounted. Megan's wedding venue. 2 months of rent nobody was supposed to know about. I looked around the table, unhurried. It comes to $41,200. Silence. Real silence now. The kind that has weight. 2 years ago, Daniel asked me for $40,000 for a duplex, and I said no. And this family stopped speaking to me. Called me the daughter who loved her money more than her blood. I tapped the page. But I'd already given you a duplex. I just gave it to you, one water heater at a time, over 11 years, and none of you ever called that a triumph. You only remembered the one time I said no. Mom's smile was gone. Her hand had left mine somewhere in the last minute. Claire, she said, low, warning. You're embarrassing the family. And that was the sentence, the one I'd heard my entire life. You're embarrassing the family. Meaning, be quiet, be small, pay the check, keep the room calm. I reached into the folder and took out the last thing, the index card, and I read it out loud to the whole table in my own handwriting in Rachel's steady words. You are not responsible for managing other people's disappointment. I set it down on top of the bank records. I love you, I said, and I meant it, and my voice didn't shake. All of you. But I'm done being the machine that keeps this family quiet. I'm not paying for a dinner I didn't order, thrown by people who erased me for 2 years and only called when the check was coming. I picked up my bag. I left the folder on the table. They could keep it. All of it. The receipts of everything I'd ever given. And I looked at my brother, standing frozen behind a $4,000 bill with his own name on it. Enjoy the veuve, Daniel, I said. It really is the good one. I walked out of that room and I didn't run. That was the part that surprised me. My whole life, leaving meant fleeing. The fast walk, the held breath, the tears saved for the car. But I walked out of the Ashwood Grill's private dining room at a normal pace, past the empty shells and the drained bottles, and 18 people who had, for the first time in my life, absolutely nothing to say to me. Behind me, I heard Aunt Carol start up. Well, I never! And Daniel's voice climbing again, and my mother saying my name once, sharp, the way you call a dog that slipped its leash. I kept walking. Diane caught me at the hostess stand. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me, and I looked at her. And then she reached out and squeezed my arm the way she used to in those loading docks at midnight, when everything was on fire and we were the only two people who knew how to put it out. "I've got you," she said quietly. "Whatever happens back there, that's not your fire anymore." I almost lost it right there. 2 years of therapy and a folder full of receipts, and it was Diane Okafor's 4 words in a restaurant lobby that nearly took my knees out. "Thank you," I managed. "Go home, Claire." She smiled. And for what it's worth, that was the cleanest exit I've seen off that floor in 12 years. Textbook. I laughed. A real one. Wet and startled. Then I pushed through the heavy glass doors into the cold, and I walked out to the back row, past the valet stand I hadn't paid for, to my Subaru with the coffee stain on the seat. And I got in and I sat there. I didn't cry. I called Priya. She picked up on the first ring, because of course she'd been sitting by her phone. "Well," she said, "tell me you didn't pay." "I didn't pay," I said. There was a pause. And then my best friend of 9 years let out a whoop so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Here's what happened after, because I know you want to know. The check, I found out later, went unpaid at the table for almost 20 minutes. Daniel didn't have $4,000. Of course he didn't. The man leases a BMW he can't afford and drives 40 minutes to save $3 on a charger. The card he'd put down to hold the table got declined when they finally ran it. It came out in front of everyone that the great provider, the man who ordered the good one loud enough for 2 rooms to hear, couldn't cover the dinner he'd staged to prove he'd never needed me. In the end, it was Dad. Quiet, jaw-tight Dad, who hadn't said one word to me all night, who put down a card that worked. An emergency card, Megan told me later, that he wasn't supposed to touch. He paid the $4,000 for a party of 18 so the family could walk out of the Ashwood Grill with what was left of its dignity. I felt something when I heard that. Not triumph, something quieter and sadder. Because for one night, my father got to feel exactly what I'd felt for 11 years, handed a bill for a room full of people who assumed someone else would always cover it. I don't know if he made the connection. I hope he did. The messages came in over the next few days, and they told me everything I needed to know about who these people actually were. Aunt Carol. 3 paragraphs about how I'd humiliated the family and how family doesn't keep score. From the woman who apparently keeps very detailed score of exactly how much everyone else should be spending. Daniel. Nothing for 4 days, then a single text, "Hope you're happy," which I read once and did not answer. Mom. A voicemail I listened to twice. The first half was anger. How could you, in front of everyone, after everything? And then, near the end, her voice cracked and she said, "I didn't know it was $41,000, Claire. I didn't know it added up to that." A long pause on the recording. I don't know what we did. I saved that voicemail. I haven't called her back yet, but I haven't deleted it either. That's about as far as I've gotten. And then, on the 5th day, a text from a number I almost didn't recognize. It was Megan, my cousin who'd asked, over the seafood tower, whether I ever felt guilty. And all it said was, "I've been thinking about what you said. The part about giving them a duplex, 1 water heater at a time. I do it too, with my mom. I didn't know it had a name. Thank you for saying it out loud." That one, I answered. I told Rachel all of it, the following week, in her office with the good armchair and the box of tissues I finally didn't need. When I finished, she didn't say, "Well done," or "I'm proud of you."
She just tilted her head and asked the question she always asks. How do you feel? And I actually thought about it. That's the thing therapy gives you if you stay long enough. The pause before the reflex. The half second where you get to choose. Lighter, I said finally, and sad, both, at the same time. Rachel nodded, like that was exactly the right answer. Grief and freedom usually show up together, she said. You didn't just put down a check that night, Claire. You put down a job. You'd been the family's emotional accountant since you were a kid. Of course it's both. The family's emotional accountant. I wrote that one down. It's been 3 months now. I still run events. This spring, I coordinated a wedding for 240 people on a hillside vineyard, and when the caterer's van broke down 2 hours before the ceremony, I fixed it. Calm, fast, textbook. And I loved every second. Because that's the difference. Fixing things is a beautiful skill when you choose it, and a cage when someone assigns it to you at birth. I bought myself a new car seat cover. The coffee stain is gone. Priya and I are talking about a trip. Somewhere with a beach and no cell reception. I haven't spoken to Daniel. I may never. That's allowed, it turns out. Rachel says you're permitted to love people and still decline to be their bank. And every so often, I take out that index card. I got it back. I kept a copy. And I read the 8 words that ended 11 years of quietly buying my family's approval, one water heater at a time. You are not responsible for managing other people's disappointment. I used to think love meant always saying yes. That if I just gave enough, covered enough, stayed quiet enough, they'd finally decide I was worth keeping. I was 36 years old before I understood that the people who only call you when the check arrives were never measuring your love. They were measuring your balance. And the bravest thing I ever did wasn't standing up in that dining room. It was sitting in my Subaru afterward, in the cold, with the engine off, and realizing, for the first time in my entire life, I didn't owe anybody a single thing. I started the car. And I drove home. The end.